A computer is supposed to be the one thing that always gets the math right. In 1994, Intel shipped a processor that sometimes divided numbers wrong. When customers asked for a working one, Intel asked them to prove they needed it. That decision cost the company $475 million. The chip was the Pentium. At the time, it was Intel's flagship, the processor going into millions of new PCs. This was the era of the little Intel Inside sticker. For the first time, a lot of ordinary people actually knew the name of the company that made the chip in their computer. Somewhere inside that chip was a part whose job was division. To do that quickly, the Pentium used a shortcut. It looked up part of the answer in a table built into the hardware. That table was supposed to hold a certain set of values. A few of them were missing. 5 entries out of more than 1,000 were blank when they shouldn't have been. Almost all the time, it made no difference. But for a few specific divisions, the chip would return a slightly wrong answer. Here's what that actually looked like. Take one particular division. The correct answer starts 1.3338. The Pentium gave 1.3337. The two agree for the first few digits, then quietly drift apart. Small, but wrong. The person who found it was a math professor named Thomas Nicely at a small college in Virginia. He was running a long calculation involving prime numbers, and his results weren't lining up. He spent months checking his own work first, his code, his math, other computers. Eventually, he traced it to the Pentium itself. In October 1994, he emailed a few people about it, and word spread online fast. Now, here's the part that matters. Intel already knew. They'd found the flaw themselves months earlier and had quietly started correcting it in newer chips. They just hadn't mentioned it to anyone. And when the story broke, that's where it went wrong. Intel's position was technically fair. They said the error was extremely rare, that a normal person doing everyday spreadsheet math might run into it about once every 27,000 years. To an engineer, this was a minor issue that affected almost nobody. So Intel offered to replace the chip, but only if you called them, explained what you used your computer for, and convinced them you really needed it. They would decide whether your problem counted. That did not go over well. People had paid for a brand new computer, been told it did arithmetic wrong, and were now being asked to prove they deserved a working one. The joke started. Newspapers ran with it. It became one of the first big pylons of the early internet. Then, in December, IBM stepped in. IBM sold PCs with Pentium chips inside, and it announced it was halting shipments of those computers. IBM claimed the error could turn up far more often than Intel said, as often as once every 24 days. The exact numbers were argued over, but the message the public heard was simple. A major company does not trust this chip. The pressure kept building, and on December 20th, 1994, Intel gave up the fight. It apologized and offered to replace the chip for anyone who asked. No questions, no justification. To cover it, Intel took a charge of $475 million for a bug that, on the numbers, almost no one would ever have run into. So what do you take from this? The interesting part isn't the bug. Bugs happen. 5 missing entries in a table is an ordinary engineering mistake. The expensive part was everything that came after. Intel was still acting like a company that sold parts to other engineers, where "it's rare, here are the details" is a perfectly good answer. But Intel Inside had quietly turned them into a consumer brand. And regular customers didn't want a risk assessment. They wanted the thing they paid for to just work. Intel's CEO at the time, Andy Grove, later wrote about this as the moment the company realized it wasn't only selling components anymore. And it's a shape you still see everywhere. The mistake is rarely what does the real damage. It's usually what comes next. Whether you own it quickly or spend a month explaining how small it is while people stop trusting you. If you've ever watched a small bug turn into a much bigger mess because of how it got handled, you know the feeling. Tell me about it in the comments. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. There are plenty more coming.